is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an Annus Horribilis.
The marriages of her 3 oldest children ended that year, the most bitter and wrenching being the split of Prince Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, once celebrated as the glamorous future king and queen.
It's bad enough to go through that trauma as a private individual, but to have to do it in the full glare of publicity must be incredibly difficult.
Diana had very quickly become the most popular royal. Her beauty and style, empathy and vulnerability marked her out from other members of the family. She was the people's princess.
She was a princess and a member of the royal family, but she was also a global figure, someone who had brought a lot of change to the monarchy and the way that it operated.
Her shocking death triggered a crisis for the Queen.
Generally speaking, what's been remarkable about the Queen is she's remained in step with her people over, so many decades. But there has been moments where it seemed that she has been out of step, and I think the most significant one was after the death of Diana, and it was really an incredible 10 days where it seemed really like there was almost like the United Kingdom on the cusp of some kind of civil war.
I'm learning from the Press Association now that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died.
Princess Diana's death was a global event of huge global significance. I mean, it's hard to understand that from the perspective of today. And therefore, the Queen, all the way through the succeeding days after the death, was both trying to perform her role as monarch, but also grieving and anxious about the children and how to protect them.
Diana's children, Princes William and Harry, were on holiday at Balmoral at the time of the crash. The Queen stayed with them.
The boys were the centre of her thinking. The thought that she should come down and sit in Buckingham Palace with 2 little bereaved boys with absolutely nothing to do except grieve would be the last thing you'd want to suggest. It was much more sensible to keep the boys in Scotland doing things.
I think she understood that if she could channel or take or shoulder the anger of the nation at what had happened, that in its own way would have been a service, not just to the nation, but to this thing that she was probably more dedicated to than anyone will realize, which was her family, her love for her son, for her grandsons, for the mother of her grandsons.
The British public behaved in the most extraordinary way over Diana, and they were hysterical. I think she probably felt, well, surely my duty is to stay with my grandchildren, not with these hysteric people dropping flowers all the time.
The Queen will always be criticised for having put her family in a very special place in her concerns. And I think that that's a criticism that she will gladly wear.
Whatever her intentions, these were testing times for the Queen. People began to demand she return to London to fly the palace flag at half-mast to honour Diana's memory.
They wanted to see the Queen, they wanted actions, and the headlines in London, where are you, Mum? There was a real sense of a sort of baying crowds with the Queen just not responsive to her people.
It was very difficult to work out how to do the right thing in these circumstances, and all the way through I was concerned to try and protect the monarchy, because there was at the time a backlash, if you like.
And I think it must have been quite an unpleasant time to have to go out and meet the crowd and wondering really whether was it going to be a hostile reception.
Was this a moment that was going to literally end the inheritance, as people were sometimes saying?
When they finally did come down to London, it was almost the country holding its breath. And I remember watching, thinking, God, are they going to start booing the Queen? And they got out of the car and there was this hushed silence. There was just this slow ripple of applause, and it was like the country kind of exhaled.
It was my job to meet her outside the gates and escorted her and Prince Philip outside while she met the crowd and looked at all the flowers. And you can see the Queen was visibly touched about all that.
The Queen all the way through was listening to the advice. She was trying to work out the right thing to do. In the end, she came to her own view, ultimately, that she had to come and to speak.
This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered. No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her but felt they knew her will remember her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death.
But for a time, it really did look like she'd perhaps dropped a ball and that the monarchy was, you know, really rocking. And I think that was probably its most vulnerable point during the Queen's reign.
It could have been extremely difficult for the royal family. I think it was a moment of real vulnerability. But on the other hand, she was acutely aware of that, the Queen, and she showed ultimately that she was completely capable of dealing with it. The Queen's life has been a continual process of evaluation, re-evaluation. You know, after Princess Diana's death, that was a big moment of recalibration, and the royal family did it, and she led it.
I think there was a sense of reassessing the institution throughout that period, and a lot of it came to fruition after the death of the princess. The kind of events that the Queen was doing, the communications side was revamped, the reduction of the civil list, the royal finances, the Queen and the royal family paying tax, the opening of Buckingham Palace.
All institutions in Britain that want to survive must consistently reinvent themselves. And the Queen, from the day she became sovereign to the day she died, understood the need for that reinvention. And if you compare the court that was surrounding her on the day she died with the one that she walked into off that aircraft from Kenya, it is quite remarkable how much change the Queen saw to it that took place through her reign.
But if the death of Diana brought change to the monarchy, there was no end to the personal heartache for the Queen. Her sister died, and soon afterwards, her mother. Elizabeth was now the matriarch in a monarchy with an uncertain future.
Change has become a constant. Managing it has become an expanding discipline. The way we embrace it defines our future. For if a jubilee becomes a moment to define an age, then for me we must speak of change, its breadth and accelerating pace over these years. I would like above all to declare my resolve to continue, with the support of my family, to serve the people of this great nation of ours to the best of my ability through the changing times ahead.